Jurassic World Rebirth is one movie I have a very hard time reviewing. On one hand, as a Jurassic fan, I thoroughly enjoyed this film and would freak out every time a legacy dinosaur like the Tyrannosaurus would appear. But on the other hand, I really couldn't help but not cringe at some of the scenes or think about some of the major flaws that this movie had. If you didn't read the full title, I need to state that this review will be littered with spoilers. But for those of you who haven't seen the movie yet, I'm working hard to make way for a non-spoiler review for all you guys who want to do your homework before seeing this motion picture. This video will really just be one long ramble about my thoughts about this film, split into multiple different chapters. Those chapters will be shown within the timestamps of this video. Keep in mind that I won't discriminate against anyone's opinion about this movie. You might disagree with the stuff I say about this feature film, and that is all right. All that matters is that we are both fans of this iconic franchise. The rest of this video will have JWE2 sandbox gameplay over it of me building a hybrid research facility since Universal is very strict with copyright. Anyway, to chapter 1. The plot is about a group of scientists going off to an island filled with mutated dinosaurs to retrieve blood samples from them so they can sell it to scientists who'll make a cure out of the blood. Every single major story beat could be predicted after just watching the first act, which is usually the case if a story involves a group of people wanting to retrieve an object. In this film, the object was of course dinosaur blood samples. What annoyed me in the A-plot was that the blood sample stuff was really not prioritized. So to me, it was really just another lazy reason to head to a new dinosaur island and face dinosaurs that, apart from their appearance, really weren't too frightening. However, although the plot was really simple and predictable, I have to say, this movie went by quickly, even when there was an entire B-plot of filler. This 2-hour movie really only felt like one single hour, and this left me really annoyed since most of the characters, in fact, all of the characters, didn't get the development I think they deserved. In fact, in the beginning of the film, Scarlett Johansson's character, whose name was like Dora or Zorro or Goro, I forgot her name, so we'll stick with calling her Goro. Anyway, it was teased in the beginning of the film that Goro's mother died in a car accident, but apart from one or two scenes in the first act, that little piece of info was never brought up again, which is a shame knowing it could have done a lot to develop her character, or give her some traits that could involve grief or maybe regret. Or maybe they could have kept the mother alive and Goro goes on to this mission to raise money for her mom's healthcare. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll save all the character yap for the character part of this video. But anyway, everyone can agree that that B-plot with the family that somehow got stuck on the island as well is completely useless. It does not do anything to contribute to the A-plot whatsoever. So this whole other storyline would have probably been better off removed from this film as a whole and introduced as a new piece of media. That way, the A-plot can use the extra runtime they now have to further develop their notoriously weak characters. Let's look at the original Jurassic Park. This movie's runtime is only a few minutes shorter than Rebirth, and its plot was way more compelling. It's about a paleontologist named Alan Grant who unknowingly got himself into trouble by going into a dinosaur theme park with an old rich guy. Grant gets trapped on the island as a disgruntled scientist named Dennis Nedry shuts off the power grid to aid in his subplot of stealing dinosaur embryos. Whereas in Rebirth, the plot was literally just Goro and her gang needed some money, so they went to a dinosaur island to get some blood samples. There's no external human threat to aid in making the plot more complex like the original Jurassic Park did, apart from a lackluster villain whose only motive was needing more money than everyone else. The mutant dinosaurs were also very underutilized. They looked scary, but they didn't act scary. For example, if I saw Jason Voorhees right behind me, I would be terrified. But if he suddenly did a Fortnite dance, I would probably be laughing even though he has a blood-covered chainsaw in his right hand. There was no explanation whatsoever about what the D-Rex actually was, which makes it a lazy plot device. Heck, it was so useless that I wouldn't even call it a plot device. It's more of a marketing device only used for marketing toys, video game DLCs, and other stuff. Also, did the dinosaurs really have to be mutated? The only reason they are mutated is that they have some unique toys to sell to kids. And to be honest, I feel as if the Jurassic fanbase would have enjoyed this film more if they used real dinosaurs instead. This movie also does a really good job at under-explaining. Like, how on earth did Duncan survive that T-Rex attack when he was obviously about to be eaten? I would have gained so much more respect for Duncan if he died protecting his crew, but somehow he survived, which is another missed opportunity. Duncan and Goro are pretty good friends, and if a sequel was ever to be made, Duncan's death might influence the way Goro acts and behaves in that sequel. The same goes for the close call the younger daughter had halfway through the film. She's trapped under a capsized raft, and the T-Rex standing over her goes and takes a bite out of it. And somehow, the raft doesn't pop, because rubber and Kevlar are interchangeable in this universe. So the daughter somehow survives the attack and manages to swim to safety, which is another big missed opportunity. Although it sounds cruel, I would have made the daughter die. It just feels too convenient that both the raft and the daughter survived the T-Rex attack. Also, how did the T-Rex get to this island? I thought it was established that this island was solely meant for mutated dinosaurs. Did the Rex surf on a mosasaur or something? If I missed something, comment down below to correct me. I also once again have to point out the stuff about the pacing. The pacing was atrociously fast, and I honestly wish that some of the scenes, like the lab scene, were longer to better develop some of these characters. Once again, the plot was enjoyable to watch whilst I was in the movie theater, but I can't help but ignore the simplicity of it. So, overall, I have to rate this plot a 6 out of 10. It wasn't too bad, but this movie faced plenty of missed opportunities. Spielberg in 1993 made a more complex plot, even though this one had a shorter runtime. He managed to pull it off because the Nedry B-plot directly contributed to the main plot, and Gareth Edwards made a simple, predictable, and lazy plot even with a bit more runtime than the original film. As you could probably tell from the review of my plot, talking about characters is where I really shine. In my opinion, characters are what drives a story. You cannot make a story without any characters, and let's be real, relatable characters are often what drives the emotion that a movie gives off, and most critics rate stories based on how strong their emotions were when watching the movie. If the movie was a drama and the critic cried, it was a good drama. If the movie was action and the critic could hear his own heartbeat, it was a good action film. But for me, the times where I did feel emotion, it did not come from the characters. It came from the Jurassic Park theme song, but we're talking about characters in this segment, not the score, so that won't count. Talking about emotion, I couldn't help but notice other missed opportunities when it comes to deepening the characters. During the scene where the Tyrannosaurus attacks the daughter, I have to say again that I would have made the daughter die. The daughter's death would have ultimately influenced her family's emotions as they continued the trek to safety. And one of the best ways a movie can get the character to be relatable is through grief. Showing us their grief of the younger daughter's death would have made them a lot more complex. And who knows, maybe someone else in the family gets eaten because they're too distracted by grief. Also, the daughter dying restarts the chain of an innocent side character dying in the most gruesome fashion possible that was ruined by Jurassic World Dominion. In Jurassic Park, it was John Arnold. Lost World, Eddie Carr. JP3 was Mr. Udetsky, Jurassic World was about Zara, and Fallen Kingdom had the Brachiosaurus. I have to circle back to Goro's buddy in the white shirt whose name I forgot, but I remember that his only motive was money. There wasn't any other force that made him want to leave the girl on the ship to die, or pull a gun on the family near the end, aside from a briefcase full of cash and coins. Aside Nedry, who I can't really blame for stealing embryos. Nedry's reason, of course, did involve money, but he was also severely disgruntled. He always got into arguments with Hammond, and frankly, he was tired of his job. Hammond really only uses Nedry as the other tech dude, which makes Nedry feel a bit neglected considering he is a smart man when it comes to tech. Some people may call Nedry dumb, and I don't blame them for that. I mean, he did try to play fetch with the dinosaur, but you have to admit, Nedry's plan was pretty smart. The only thing that got in the way was the bad weather. But he had no other choice but to follow through with his plan because he was on a bit of a time limit set by younger Tim Cook. All of this is made a bit clearer in the Michael Crichton novel. The character arcs in Rebirth were also very, very useless. It starts off when the paleontologist dude, who we'll call Glasses, proposes the idea of what if they don't sell these blood samples to scientists who will only get the cure they make out of the blood available to a small portion of the world. The rich portion. Goro ends up saying no to the pitch. Literally just a straight no. And it's never brought up again apart from 2 other scenes. The next scene it appears in is when Goro asks Glasses about how they could manage to make this cure available to people all around the world, and Glasses suggests the idea to open source it, which admittedly isn't too bad of an idea. Goro saying no to the pitch really is only influenced by money. But in this film, she doesn't really feel like the greedy type. In fact, she mentioned grief about her mother more times than she did money, and she only mentioned her mother maybe 4 times throughout the entire film. This is because it just comes out of nowhere. She doesn't think about it, or at least we don't see her thinking about it. Let's move back to my examples from the original Jurassic Park. Grant starts off hating kids, calling them annoying and smelly, but he still knows kids are people, which is the reason he saved Lex and Tim from the car accident. After this, those kids are dependent on Grant, and a few jokes later, Grant comes to actually wanting a kid. Grant's arc comes from not liking kids to liking kids gradually over the course of the movie. Remember that key word, gradually. Compare this to Goro's arc, where it could only really work if the character evolved from greedy to selfless, and Goro was never greedy to begin with. She always seemed somewhat selfless from the very start, so it wasn't even an arc, it was more like a character horizontal line. This open sourcing arc would have been better if it was centered around Goro's buddy in the white shirt, who we'll call Money, cause that's the only thing he likes. So throughout the course of the movie, he spent some time sharing some PTSD with the crew, and because of these moments, he learns to see the point that Glasses is making with the open sourcing, thus making it more satisfying once he finally says yes to the pitch. The mutants in this movie literally have no motives, just like most of the characters. They kill for the sake of killing, which is a shame considering the D-Rex was originally meant to have a motive to kill. It was originally meant to be tired of all these experiments done to it, so it's gone to hate humans as a whole. Since all of this was cut, the T-Rex, which isn't even the main dino villain of this movie, had stronger motives for wanting to kill the family, those motives being, it was woken up from its nap. And if your dad goes crazy when you wake him up, just imagine what a T-Rex would do. The only character I really only somewhat care about is Glasses. Some people might say he's just walking exposition, and although I agree with them, the exposition is masked with him being a dino nerd. And since I also love dinosaurs, if I was in his position, I'm sure I would also be nerding out if I saw my favorite prehistoric creatures. Moving back to the topic of Mr. Money, he was not by any means hateable. When he died, I'm glad that his death was on screen because he was after all the villain, but since he wasn't a well-written villain, it didn't feel all too satisfying when he inevitably perished. But let's move on to the family's plot, because they are really just there. Their motives unclear, their job unknown. All the dad does is stay silent to the random jokes that his eldest daughter's boyfriend makes, and the boyfriend is pretty annoying too. But frankly, the acting wasn't too bad for a character this simple. All he is comic relief, which does not go well if not executed properly. For example, during the first night they spent on this island, the dad drops one of the hardest quotes in the film, and the boyfriend just went, "I wanna piss." Overall, the characters were insanely simple, often with one or sometimes even zero driving forces to make them do what they did in the film. Like in the plot, there were plenty of missed opportunities that could have been spotted if this movie was given a tiny bit more thought. Overall, the simple characters get a 5 out of 10. Just as I finished watching the movie, I rated it a 7.5 out of 10, which is monstrously high. It mainly got that rating because of its enjoyability and the fact that I compared it to other Jurassic World movies and not the franchise as a whole during my watch. But now that I truly think about the movie, it's gotta be somewhere within the 6.6 out of 10 range. This movie was quite enjoyable. It even had some hard-hitting quotes, but the flaws far outweigh them. One of the flaws, which I didn't really mention in the first 2 chapters, was that this really didn't feel like a Jurassic Park film, mainly because the new mutants didn't even remotely look like dinosaurs. They were more like aliens to me. And Jurassic Park is meant to have scary dinosaurs, not aliens. That's one of the things that make JP so special. It's horror for children. I enjoyed the river scene. I enjoyed the mosasaur scene. The titanosaur scene was by far the best in the movie, especially when it comes to developing the character of Glasses. But the more I truly think about this film, the more flaws I realize it has. When I first watch a movie, I try and seek all the good things that the movie did. And if I can't find too many good things, that's how I know it's a bad movie. And although I'd say this film in particular wasn't bad, I still would definitely agree with the fact that it's underwhelming. Perhaps I expected more from Gareth Edwards, especially since he has proven he can make a good film centered around a film franchise. Just take a look at Rogue One. Rogue One is by far one of the best Star Wars projects to be released. Its plot was compelling, its dialogue was great, the characters were still pretty thin, but it's much less apparent in Rogue than in Rebirth. But for some reason, he couldn't pull off the stuff he did in Star Wars for Jurassic. So, to sum it all up, Jurassic Park is technically back, but it really isn't. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I also want to thank you guys so much for getting me 100 subscribers in just under a month, pushing me over to that 900 subscriber threshold. Even though I didn't enjoy this movie as much as I thought I would, you might disagree and say that it was actually pretty good, and that is okay. All that matters is that we're all Jurassic Park fans and that we have the same interest of our prehistoric past. Have a great day, and see you next time. Oh, wait. Oh. Hey. This dude's chill.